and cover some topics around innovation and entrepreneurship and launching your venture. I've given this presentation a few times over the years and kind of revamped it last year and putting together some of the resources that I feel like are answer a lot of the questions that we get asked most over the course of the year that are asked to us in our center. Is what I plan on doing is I plan on like staying at a high level and kind of covering some of the main resources we have here on campus and through our innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem, as well as some national resources as well. And hopefully you find them useful to you. And so I'll try and leave like 15-20 minutes at the end for questions and answers as well. And then feel free to reach out to us if you reach out to me if you have any questions as well. Also, there's several of our, and I think most of you know here the people in our ecosystem that are in the room here as well. But you know, we've got Alan and Alan Singleton and Laura Appenzauer, Laura Lyle, Marissa, my colleague Marissa from Technology Entrepreneur Center, and Gerald. So they can help answer any questions that pop up as well. If I missed anybody that I may have, but I'll ask them to help me out as well. So just Gerald did a good job of kind of hitting some of the highlights of my background, but I think it's good for context to just hear a little bit of, to just see a little bit of my background. So as Gerald mentioned, I currently run the Technology Entrepreneur Center and Assistant Dean of Innovation and Entrepreneurship in Granger Engineering. I've been working as an EIR here at EnterpriseWorks for many years. At the time, or back when I started, I was running a Pattern Insight, which was a startup that we launched here at EnterpriseWorks. I think we were at that office up there. We were one of the offices on the first floor. We kind of moved around EnterpriseWorks at the time. We kind of started small and then grew and then eventually raised venture capital and then opened an office in Silicon Valley, but always maintained our office here at EnterpriseWorks because of the phenomenal resources that were available here. And eventually we were acquired by VMware. And to this day, VMware still has our product that launched, and it's got, it does several $100 million in revenue of our product, Log Insight. For those that, is anybody familiar with Splunk? Familiar with Splunk? Splunk's a massive company now. And I think Splunk was just acquired not too long ago for several $1 billion. VMware wanted to compete with Splunk in the data center, and they acquired our technology and team to launch Log Insight. It was actually called Pattern Insight Log Insight at the time. And so it's still running to this day, and that was put together by our team that all launched here at EnterpriseWorks. So through my experience at Pattern Insight, we actually got involved with the SBIR program and did a lot of SBIR work, and so I became very familiar with that program and built a lot of connections that still exist to this day. And one of the key people that was with my SBIR work was Errol Arklick, who ended up launching the ICOR program at NSF. He was my program director, and then that helped us with launch our ICOR programs here on our campus. Then also I got involved with a lot of other NSF commercialization programs like the PFI program that we'll talk a little bit about today as well. So that's kind of my background there. So the connections we built have been very helpful to me throughout the years. So briefly, I'll mention this as well, that we've got a very vibrant entrepreneurship ecosystem on our campus. This is one of the charts I often use to show it. This doesn't show a pathway through our ecosystem, but at least shows a lot of that we do have a very vibrant ecosystem on our campus. I work a lot with a lot of our peer institutions, and I think, I don't hesitate to say that I think we have one of the top innovation entrepreneurship ecosystems on a university campus. I think we've got a very collaborative one that we work well together across our campus, and we just have unlimited resources that a lot of times our peer institutions come here, and specifically in this building, and they're just amazed at what we have and wish they had something like this on their campus. So I think that's it's just phenomenal what we have. And then we've got great resources in Chicago. We connect well with our partners up there, and then nationally as well. And so, and it's very easy for teams like yourselves that are here to connect and utilize those resources also. So a couple of things that I'd like to talk about today that I'll just kind of briefly mention is there's a lot of different frameworks around technology commercialization and about commercializing university IP or your own IP. But there are five components I often see that are critical in commercialization. And so I'm going to just briefly talk a little bit about those, and that's the technology innovation, capital that's needed, teams and skills, and then community. And these are the five things I'm going to talk about. There's many other things we could talk about, but these are the things that I often see are critical for successfully launching the university-based innovation. So I'll talk a little bit about those, and then we'll and the main ones that I'll spend most of the time are technology, innovation, validation, and then capital. Those are the main ones I'll spend most of my time on. And so with that, let me just talk a little bit about the items to consider around around the innovation and technology. And specifically, I'll talk a little bit about the items to consider on that end, and specifically the intellectual property, traction and customer discovery specifically, proof of concept funding, and then programs that we have on our campus to help you with those. Okay, because these are some of the key parts that I see that we that people struggle with at the beginning. So specifically, let me talk a little bit about technology around intellectual property, and I'll talk a little bit about the university intellectual property. These are things we often get a lot of questions about from whether it's a faculty member or a student. And it's around intellectual property. Who owns the intellectual property? What resources do we have on campus to assist us with? And let me just be clear, the things I'll mention here are just kind of broad brush strokes and generalities, because specifics often come down to, or there's often specifics that come down to your unique situation, and so they may be a little bit different from that, or for your unique situation. But a couple of things I'll mention here is, according to the general rules that determine what happens with intellectual property on a campus, in general, according to the general rules, the university owns all intellectual property developed by university employees or by anyone, including students that use university facilities, equipments, or funds. But let's talk about specifically what that means. So if you're a university faculty member or a graduate student coming out of a university lab, in general, the university is going to own that intellectual property. And then if you're going to start a company, you're going to license that from the university. Okay? Then in general, if you're an undergraduate student and you launch something on campus and it's not out of a lab, it's just something that you come up with, and even if it was like in a class, in general, that's going to be your intellectual property, and you own it, and the university isn't going to have any claim on it. That's in general how it works. Okay? And the technology transfer office, in my opinion, I think we have an easy technology transfer office to work with. They're there to help you. If you're a faculty member or graduate student, they're there to help you make sure that the university protects their IP, and they'll help you as you try to spin out a company and launch it. Okay? So that's typically how it works. Some of the questions we have from students are, is the university going to try and take my intellectual property? I've never found that to be the case. The university isn't there to try and take it from you. They're there to answer questions. Sometimes they'll ask you to make sure that things are clear. If you're a student and you're going to try and launch a company, sometimes the investors will ask you to make sure that it's not the university. So sometimes you have to talk to the tech transfer office, and they'll look at it and make sure that it's not something that the university does own, but they'll provide a clear document to you that'll say that it's not the university's. But those are kind of the main things that come up with around intellectual property. Alan, do you have any other comments or anything you'd like to add about intellectual property?
Well, yeah, I think you covered it at a high level, and certainly those are good general rules, and each situation is a little bit different. So if you use a lot of resources in your undergrad, maybe you can end up with a situation where you have to interact with them. And I think for the most part, there is a good relationship with OTM. They've got a lot of IP to deal with. In general, if you create something and put it through OTM, they're willing to work with you to license it back.
Yeah.
If you're serious about starting it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so again, there have been undergraduates that have used significant resources or come out of a lab. That intellectual property is there. That is the university's. But in general, if you're an undergraduate student, it's your idea. It belongs to you. you don't end up, let me make something else that's very clear. If you're an undergraduate and you participate in a program like the COSAD New Venture Challenge, it doesn't affect your intellectual property by participating in like the COSAD New Venture Challenge. There's programs like that that are for students in their commercial, or that are provided by the entrepreneurship center and such that doesn't have any impact on your intellectual property. Let me see here. Other questions that pop up.
Here's a question.
Oh, yes.
I have a question about the intellectual property.
Yes.
For example, if we do use significant university resources, it makes it the university's intellectual property. How do we go about starting a business after that?
Very good question. So the question was, if we go about using significant university resources and the university owns the intellectual property, how do we go about creating a company from it? So in a situation where the university owns the intellectual property, is what happens is you end up going and forming a company, and then you meet with the technology transfer office, and you license the technology back from the university. And there's a negotiation with the university, and they license it back to you, and there's things that you negotiate with them around a royalty rate and a percentage equity, something like that. But they're just in a discussion like that, and they license the technology back to the startup. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that process is fairly straightforward.
I would say yes. There would be some people that would say there's a much more of a negotiation, but I've always seen it work out. I shouldn't say that. There's been some issues where in the past where I've seen a few cases, but as I said, let me just say this again. I have seen our tech transfer office is one of the easiest to work with compared to others that I've seen. But pretty straightforward process. And let me add one other thing, then Alan will add something in. I have found that they are a founder-friendly technology transfer office. And the other thing that I think is important to note is if there's ever any questions about whether or not there's intellectual property, the key thing you want to do is sit down with one of the technology managers, and they're very good to work with and help you determine whether or not you did use significant resources, and they'll help you make those determinations. That's a key thing. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, say you got to start a company and you're an undergrad and you need to use, let's pretend Jed has a lab, and and it's not within tech. And so what you do is you could have a facilities use agreement that spells out how things will be developed and owned. And if you pay Jed's lab, he's able to pay some people. A lot of times you'll be able to keep the IP within your company if Jed wants to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, there's been situations where somebody actually has some intellectual property at the university. The technology transfer office makes a determination that they do not want to patent it, and they actually release it to the company. I can think of a couple of companies right now that are actually doing quite well, where the university made a determination that they didn't want to license it, so they released it and gave it to the team, and they actually went and started a company around it. So, good question. Any other questions? And we can answer some questions at the end as well. Okay, so that's intellectual property, and happy to talk more about that offline as well. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about, if you have some intellectual property, how do you determine whether or not it's worth commercializing, or if you have something where the people actually want? And that goes around to validation and traction. So a question we'll often get, and kind of some more context around this, one of the questions we often get more than anything is somebody will come to us and say, can you introduce us to investors? Can you connect us with some people like that? Often is what investors will want to see more than anything is, do you have traction? Have you validated what you're working on? And so that's one of the most important things that you've got. I've got a slide here that we put together is a kind of a pipeline of some programs that we've got that we use. And now let me just tell you also, this is an NSF-centric slide, but it actually works well for other agencies as well. But it shows that what do you do if you have an idea and you want to do some programs to actually validate what you're working on. Okay, so let me show you just quickly what we've got here. So if you've got an idea, and whether it's funded by some research or by NSF funded research or non-NSF funded research, we've got some programs that actually you can run to help validate your idea. Okay. Because what you ultimately want to do is find out, do I actually have something that people care about? Okay, it's one of the most important things that you can do. Now, when we started doing this about 10 years ago or so, this was actually a novel concept that people actually hadn't thought a lot about. But nowadays, I think it's pretty common. It's common practice in about any program that we go through that people actually ask these questions early on. So these are the common questions you'll actually ask about. It's like, who are my customers or stakeholders, and what value did I deliver to them? So it's one of the most important things that you can do very early on in the process. So actually, we've got programs that can assist with that. So if you're an NSF funded, if you have NSF funded research or you have your own ideas, you can actually participate in some of our programs. We actually run programs here in this building, regional or local programs. And then we actually run regional programs throughout the Midwest, where you actually can participate with peers in throughout the region from Minnesota, Michigan, Purdue, and we actually have some themed programs as well. So if you're actually working in ag tech, or if you've got some biotech technologies as well, we actually put themed programs like that actually have some experts that work in those as well. After that, you can actually participate in some other NSF programs like the PFI program. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then there's some more advanced I-Core programs as well. And then finally, it puts you in position to get SBIR funding as well. But if you participate in these programs, you're in great shape to actually understand if you actually have a market and customers that are actually interested in your technology. And this is actually a brilliant way to make sure that you're not wasting your time building something people don't care about. But the best part about this is then when you're actually going and pitching for money, you can actually show that you've actually got validation or traction in your technology. And I've seen over the years that this has had a great impact in our teams that are participating. And the success rate of teams going on for follow-on funding is dramatic. So I mentioned a little bit about I-Core, those programs. I think now we're at the point where most people have actually heard about I-Core. Is I-Core a familiar program for most people? I think most people have in the room. But just briefly, I mentioned that in I-Core you actually define your value propositions, you define who your stakeholders and customers are, and then you go out and you validate those hypotheses. So let me just briefly mention, I mentioned that we actually run some I-Core programs locally here, we run some throughout the region, and then we prepare you to go to the national program. To get in the National Teams program, you'll actually get a $50,000 grant from the National Science Foundation to go through that program. It's a rigorous 7-week program. And then after you're done, you're in position to go get an SBIR grant or a PFI grant. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. These are excellent opportunities for follow-on funding. My colleague Marissa over here, she can help you get into these programs and go get the funding. That's actually part of her job, is to actually help you get into these programs. And again, we're happy to help you get in there. And that's actually the next steps there is talk with one of our teammates. So let me talk a little bit about proof of concept funding. So if you validated your technology, you're in great shape to go after some proof of concept funding. And how many people here are familiar with the PFI program? So LAVIS, anybody else? So PFI is a brilliant program if you're not familiar with it, and even if you are familiar with it. So it stands for Partnerships for Innovation. So the PFI program, if you're familiar with, I think most people are familiar with SBIR. PFI is a little bit different. I think that PFI is actually SBIR within the university, okay? So it used to be a much smaller program a few years ago, but they've really ramped it up, and especially in terms of dollar numbers. I'll show you the dollar numbers here in a minute. But the PFI program is SBIR within the university in the sense that SBIR dollars go to a company, PFI dollars stay within the university. So if you're a company, I'm sorry, you're not eligible for PFI, but if you're a faculty member or a researcher at the university, you are eligible for PFIs. Think of it as proof of concept funding, and it allows you to do that within the university without actually having to ramp up your company. Now, the great thing about it is you can get up to $550,000. I think it's $550,000. It's either $500,000 or $550,000. They just ramped that dollar number up last year, but you can think of it as proof of concept funding to prove out your concept. and you can do it early on, or within the university. You have to have there's a couple of key concepts to it. You need to have a commercialization expert on your team. It can be someone like me, someone in my office, someone from the tech transfer office, or an industry partner, okay? Now, there's two versions of it. There's the TT, the PFI tech transfer. The other one is the RP, which is research partnerships. So if you're actually collaborating with an industry partner, you can go after the $1 million version, okay? And again, the idea is to create a proof of concept or a prototype after this. The other thing that's interesting about this is it's completely focused on commercialization. So if you have been through ICOR before, great, okay? If you haven't been through ICOR, they are going to require that you participate in ICOR as part of your grant. So by the time you're done with PFI, you will have participated in the ICOR program. And the reason is because they are completely focused on commercialization. I think we're pretty good at getting these. I'm a co-PI on one of the $1 million PFI grants, and I've been talking a lot about these on campus, and we had a couple get submitted in the most recent solicitation. So I'm happy to see these starting to ramp up now. The natural progression is you either participate in, you either go through ICOR before or after, and then afterwards, you are well positioned for a successful SBIR, okay? I regularly review for these. I usually review at least once a year on NSF's panels, and I can tell you, if you submit for these, you are in great shape if you write a really good proposal. I can just tell you that. I think you're in really good shape to get one of these grants if you write a really solid proposal. I think it's great money. So you can see the eligibility requirements there. Obviously, read the solicitation. These are like, this is a very abbreviated version of the requirements. You need to have NSF lineage for your technology. You have to have a commercialization expert on your team. And then you see the same thing for the two different TT and RP. And then you see the deadlines. They're due in January, May, September, and then you see the funding. Yes?
Thank you for the information. So I come from a company that went through the National Life Corps.
Yes.
And one of my company members is faculty at the University of Illinois. I'm staff there too. And we are in the process of applying to SBIR, following up on that I-Corps experience. But this seems to be very interesting to us. What would you suggest? Would you suggest that we keep on pursuing, after taking the National I-Corps, pursuing SBIR, STTR, or would you agree that this is a better way about it?
Well, okay, that's a good question. And so the question is, their team went through ICOR, and now they're applying for an SBIR. His question is, what should we do? I think the answer is, it depends on your situation. There's no one answer for this, right? I wouldn't apply for both of them at the same time, because they know that, right? They know if you're applying for both. I think it depends on your situation. Far along. And that project pitch in of itself doesn't mean you're too far along, but I would maybe look at the timing. We can talk later. Let's talk later. I don't think that means that you're too far along, but I think I'd weigh the options. Okay, these are great. This is a great opportunity here. Gerald.
Real quick, assuming you're eligible for both SBIR and this program, the PFI, are the odds different? From your perspective?
Are the odds different? I think they get a lot less. So Gerald's asking about the odds of PFI. I think they get a lot fewer applications for PFI. SBIR is a massive, like a lot bigger program, quite a few more. I think the quality, my experience has been the quality of applications for PFI is a lot lower, and so I think they're for different stage companies, right? So I would say that the program manager for the PFI program is Jesus Soriano. For those that some of us know Jesus, he's a phenomenal program director and has really done a good job of turning this program around and really growing it with some vision behind it. So I can't recommend this program enough. I would absolutely look at it and apply for it if it's an opportunity. happy to talk to anybody about it if you need to. All right, time-wise. Okay, let me get on to some other things here. So those are great opportunities for funding. So funding, I think Gerald runs some other workshops down here that talks about other opportunities for funding. So I think many of you are familiar with different sources of funding. You've got self-funding, bootstrapping, friends and family, crowdfunding, incubators, accelerators. I think those are good opportunities for funding. Angel investors. I think for people who are probably familiar that we launched the Line Angels this past year. So it's an excellent opportunity for funding through that angel network. Venture capitalists, we've got Illinois Ventures here, small business grants. I think that's what we're familiar with. The SBIR, we'll talk just briefly about that as well. And then, so these are excellent opportunities to get follow-on funding. The one that I'll talk briefly about is, and I think we cover this in many different ways throughout through here at EnterpriseWorks, but I'll just briefly talk about SBIR, STTR. There's 12 different agencies that participate in, last time I counted, there's 12 different agencies that participate in the SBIR STTR program. They're all a little bit different. There's some generalities between all of them, but there's some little nuances with each different program. So I spend a lot of time working with the NSF program. I find it's typically the easiest one to work with. I always recommend that you always apply to the NSF. Sure, go apply to the other ones, but NSF I think is the easiest one to work with because they are the only one that has full-time SBIR program managers. The other ones, they just kind of do it on the side. So I think that's a great program to work with. So this slide is a little bit out of date, but I did update the numbers on the side. I actually don't have that original graphic, so I couldn't edit the text in this. I didn't edit it on the side. But this kind of gives you an idea if you're not familiar with the SBIR program, how it works. There's 3 phases in the SBIR program. Phase 1 is for proof of concept funding, and it is $275,000 is what phase 1 is, and you usually have 6 to 12 months to do a phase 1. And then if you're successful in a phase 1, you go to a phase 2. Phase 2 in NSF now is $1 million. It's some serious money. And then if you do well in that, you have an opportunity for a matching amount of up to $500,000 in a phase 2B. All combined. Oh, and then phase 3. My program manager always told us that you don't want to be in the phase 3. By phase 3, you should be up and running and have customers, and you don't want to participate in phase 3. So I never paid much attention to phase 3. So all combined between the NSF program, or the NSF program for SBIR, you can get upwards of $2 million because there's a couple of supplements in there as well. Again, all the programs are a little bit different, but they're roughly the same. There's a couple of different phases. There's some matching opportunities. NIH, the numbers can get significantly larger, but in general, that's kind of how they're all structured. Question over here? No? Just stretching? But that's how I think about it, okay? So that's how they go. Brilliant programs, and again, I would always look at the NSF in addition to whatever else you could apply for. Let me just point out one thing though. You can apply to multiple agencies, you just need to make sure that you're not applying for exactly the same thing between the different agencies, because you don't want to end up in jail, right? You don't want to be double dipping and applying for the same thing and getting funded for the same thing. So my recommendation would be, if you're going to apply to different agencies, talk to an SBIR expert that can help make sure that you're doing it the right way. We've had quite a few different teams here that have got funding for multiple agencies. In general, numbers are a little out of date on the bottom here, but I think a couple of questions that often come up are, if I'm just a one-person team or I'm a new team, will they fund us? Absolutely. These numbers on the bottom are NSF numbers from a few years ago. I don't have updated ones, but the last time I saw these numbers, 91% of the awarded companies had not had a previous phase 2. 85% of the teams, phase 2 teams, were less than 5 employees. 72% were less than 3 years. NSF does a really good job of funding very early stage companies. They found that the teams that were first-time SBIR recipients were much more successful than ones that had multiple SBIRs. So my point in showing this is, don't be afraid of applying to SBIR because you're a new team, you're at EnterpriseWorks, and you're like, yeah, I'm not sure I'll qualify. It's like, no, they know that most of the teams like you are hungry, and they think they show that they're much more likely for success. Just briefly, the type of companies they fund, or what they fund, not the type of companies, what they fund. They actually fund R&D, high-risk ventures, things that have high potential for commercialization and societal benefit. Okay? They think of it as de-risking for other investors to come in. Okay, so if it's something really risky, they'll fund it. Just a kind of an anecdotal story here of a team that was in EnterpriseWorks. I believe they were in that office right there, 124, if I remember right. It's either 124 or 126. But the team was in there. They actually had an idea that they wanted to pitch in their SBIR. They had two pathways to commercialization. They felt one was risky, one was not so risky. They actually put that in their proposal. They said, we can do this or this. There's not much risk here. They got rejected in their phase one. They said, look, you're telling me there's no risk. Like, why are we going to invest in you? Because, and they said, what the feedback was like, why don't you make a change and come back to us? And so they made the change and reapplied 6 months later and they got it. But the feedback was like, look, we fund risky things. And we're trying to de-risk, we're helping you de-risk. So I would just remember that. That's a really good story. They don't fund, I think the key thing, what they don't fund is they don't fund basic research. Okay, so you don't want to put a proposal together that is just based on basic research. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, the difference between a couple of differences between PFI and SBIR. I think some of the highlights are, I think the key thing to take away is for PFI, PFI is within the university. Think of like faculty members doing within there. It's like a research grant, but it's focused on commercialization. SBIRs are for companies. That money never flows through the university. Okay? Another key difference, PFIs can go to full-time faculty members. SBIRs, you can't be a full-time faculty member or even over 51% and get an SBIR. Okay? Those are, you'll see a couple of other differences. I think those are the critical differences between the two that we see all the time. Any questions about those? Remember that here at EnterpriseWorks, we provide the FAST Center and SBIR support. So if there's anything in your mind, you're like, I don't know what he just said, I don't remember that. Just remember that you can get SBIR assistance here at EnterpriseWorks at no charge to you. It's still free, right, Laura Bly, Gerald?
Yes.
I knew it was free, I'm just kidding. But just, we have phenomenal SBIR assistants here that will help you put together a successful SBIR. I think that's one of the best resources we provide here on our campus. All right, let me just get on a couple of other resources, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you've got. So right here, I list a bunch of our resources that are provided to our teams, not only just here at EnterpriseWorks, but across campus as well. So anything you see there, I think some of the key ones are our entrepreneurs in residence, the SBIR assistance, all the other things are important as well. iStart, all of these things are just critical, I think, to help and launch our team. Cynthia runs a lot of these programs with Gerald here at EnterpriseWorks. You want to become friends with them if you're not already. You see a lot of those, the iStart program. Let me point out this here as well. I think this is really important also. So these are some of the ones that I think are our critical campus resources. So EnterpriseWorks, the iStart, EIR, SBIR FAST Center, and these are hyperlinked if you get a copy of the slide deck. And then the College of Business recently launched a Faculty Entrepreneurial Fellows Program. So that's a program that they launched for faculty members, and right now they're in the first cohort of that. So I assume they'll have another round of that next year. Illinois Ventures, located upstairs, the university's venture capital arm. I think that's a phenomenal resource we have here on campus as well. Also, we have Illini Angels. Illini Angels is the new angel network that we just launched here at the university this past year. That's a new resource that we have. The Office of Technology Management is a great resource on campus as well, and they have the proof of concept, IPOC, that they do every year as well. I think that's another resource. And then the Technology Entrepreneur Center that Marissa and I run, and the NSF I-Core program is a critical program as well. If you have not participated, I know some of you have already participated in I-Core. If you haven't, absolutely you should participate in I-Core. It's one of our phenomenal resources. We've had hundreds, we're close to 400 teams now on our campus that have participated in I-Core, and those teams have gone on to raise well over $200 million now since its launch back in 2013. So I encourage you to do that. And if you've got any questions about that, just reach out to one of us, and we'll help get you in one of those cohorts. And I think those are our main resources that I'd like to highlight. We have plenty of other resources, but happy to, those are the main ones today to highlight today. And with that, that's all I've got. What questions do any of you have? Yes?
So you mentioned a couple of times that with I-Core, the chance of getting into EIR increases.
Yes, dramatically.
But, so I don't know what NSF, but in NIH, only in phase 2 you have a commercialization plan. So, like I'm wondering, phase 1, how do you like mention or like how do you say that you have participated?
Good question. So actually in NSF there's commercialization plan. Same thing with PFI. There's a commercialization plan in your phase 1 proposals. So in an NSF SBIR phase 1, it's a 15-page proposal. About half of it is commercialization plan, and there is nothing, as a reviewer, there is nothing special about going through I-Core. In fact, they have a firewall between SBIR and I-Core, like between the teams, like the leadership. There's a firewall. They don't talk to each other. I mean, I'm sure that maybe if they run into the hallway, they go, hey, how's it going? But they don't share like which teams go through. And I can tell you as a reviewer, the best team I ever reviewed didn't participate in I-Core. They actually participated in a different program that was a customer discovery program. It was like an accelerator, but it was the best team. I don't think that they care at all if you went through an I-Core at all. It's just the reason the success rates go up is because all of a sudden the program, if you read the proposal, if you review the proposal, it's very clear who went through I-Core and did a very good job. Now, if you go through I-Core and you didn't learn anything, it doesn't help you at all. But it's very clear when somebody goes through the program, understands who their customers are, what their pain points are, and what solutions they've developed to help solve those problems. That's what's good about I-Core. So you just write better proposals. And I actually think the other thing that's powerful about I-Core, it helps you be a better researcher. It helps you get, if you're a graduate student, it helps you get better jobs because it helps you think from a different perspective. That's what it does. That's the power of it. So, that makes sense?
Yeah, but I mean, like for NIH, because you don't have that, I'm just thinking maybe, somehow we can mention in the text that, we, did a lot of customer interviews and,
Yes.
we found that this is really their problem.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You phrase it from this way, where it's like, here's the challenge that isn't being addressed by industry, and then it's like, don't take my word for it. You include quotes from people. You don't say like, I participated in I-Core. Those are like, I roll my eyes when I see that. It's like, no, it's like, here's the challenge that isn't being addressed. Here's how we're solving it. Here's why it's painful. And then you have independent third-party people writing their quotes of what they told you. You don't even tell them you did it. You participated in customer discovery. You show it by what you're saying. That's how I do it. Good question. Yeah.
Recently on the slides you showed something about student hiring and like undergrad hiring. How do you connect like undergrads to like student founders who might want to intern there or like work with them, for example?
So the question is, how do you connect students to people that are hiring? Is that right? So sometimes we have that situation directly. Like Marissa and I were just talking this morning about a faculty member that's like, I'm looking for some students to work with me. So that happens sometimes. I always recommend to students to just do some legwork on their own, to start looking for people themselves. Because I find that's the most effective way or most powerful way for a student to get a job in a startup they're looking for. Because my experience has been startup founders are always looking for talent. And if you've got an ambitious student that's hungry to work in a startup and you come up to and say, hey, I'd like to work with you, here's why, and you've actually researched the company, startups are often eager to work for, or have people working with them that are really interested in their stuff, and they've actually researched it. Not just dropping by and saying, hey, can I work with you? I don't know anything about you, but that's what I find the most effective way. But I would also reach out and talk to people, because like there's people that come to us all the time and say, I'm looking for people, and we can help them. But like as far as like a program, we don't run a program that does
Jed, what
that.
about social cues that could assist, is not necessarily
Oh,
student to student connection?
good point. I was thinking in my mind, I was thinking faculty-based, but student to student, we do run a program that helps students, founders that are running startups connect with students. That's social cues. If you've been to a social cues event on campus, we have that where student founders get up and they say, look, this is what I'm working on. I'm looking for these type of students to work with me. We do run that all the time. So check with the TEC, or the Technology Entrepreneur Center, sign up for our mailing list, and absolutely do that.
How do you find, you talked about how we should find faculty members and what they're working on. Is there like a database that we can look through?
I mean, a good place to start is like, you can check with Gerald and Marissa, because they're involved with a lot of those startups that participate in I-Core and that are located here at EnterpriseWorks. Good question. All right, other questions? No other questions? Excellent. All right, 5 minutes early. I'll end there. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Reach out to any of our colleagues here in the room, Alan, Gerald, Marissa, Laura, and happy to help you with our ecosystem or connect better with it. But reach out anytime, and happy to help you with any of these things or share the slides. All right, thanks for coming today.